Hello, and welcome to Bots to Boardroom, the often missed economic impact of bots. Now, that is what I call an intriguing title. I'm looking forward to this. Today's webinar is sponsored by F5 and Google Cloud and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am really excited to be your moderator for this special event. But before we get to the content that we've got for you, we do have a few housekeeping things that you'll need to know about that'll help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you. So we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during this event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the questions that you ask. Now, that Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. First thing you want to do if anything goes wrong is refresh your browser. That'll fix most things that have happened. If that doesn't work, let us know in the Q&A and we will hop right on it. All right, second, next to your questions tab, you will see a handouts tab. There you will find some great resources that I encourage you to look at right now. I'd like especially to call your attention to a handout from F5 that actually offers a free consultation. That's something you might want to check out. Now, in the handouts section, you will also find links to the Gorilla Guide Book Club, where you can get access to Actual Tech Media's great printed resources on technology topics. You'll also find a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. We've got a ton of great content coming up. Check it out, see what you like, and sign up. Okay, next up, at the end of this event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Now, you have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of that prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. Okay, so one reason people come to these events, and one of the big benefits that you get as an attendee is the opportunity to ask questions of our expert presenters, and they are real experts today. So to help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event's over, we'll look over all the questions that come in, we'll pick the best one, and then we'll contact that prize winner to get them their gift card. And with that out of the way, it is now time for the main event. It's my pleasure to introduce you to the speakers who I will be on with today, Jim Downey, cybersecurity evangelist with F5, and Josh Hazlitt, a strategic technology partner manager with Google Cloud. Jim and Josh are ready to start, so the three of us are going to have a great discussion. Let's get into it. All right. So first off today, and this question is for either of you, how can companies determine their current exposure to bot attacks? And how can they align it with their risk tolerance as a company?
If your company is engaged in digital transformation, if your company depends on apps to engage with customers, bots almost certainly pose risks to your business. Actually, bots do not just represent one risk. There are many ways that criminals and unwanted actors use bots, and each of these can impact costs, revenue, customer experience, and brand reputation. Fortunately, the Cybersecurity Association, OWASP, has put together an excellent taxonomy of automated threats. It makes a great starting point for any organization trying to understand the risks that bots pose.
Josh, did you want to weigh in at this point?
I think, Jim makes a really good point. And one of the key things in Google Cloud and F5 coming together in partnership is, of course, F5 solutions are helping our customers in their digital transformation journey. And F5 solutions secure and defend against attacks that degrade application performance, decrease customer satisfaction, and have a detrimental impact on cost and revenue. And to your point, from a board perspective, these are all areas that are top of mind for today's corporate boards.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Jim, now it can be hard to determine the long-term effects of bot attacks on strategic goals. So, given that reality, do you have any case studies, stories, information that speaks to how others are formulating and mitigating this risk?
A good example is Puma, a well-known designer of athletic footwear. Puma, like other sneaker companies, reaches consumers through product launches that excite their customers, engage them with the brand, and build relationships. If they can't succeed in these launches because bots swoop in and buy all the products for resale at higher prices, these organizations cannot carry out their strategic goals of building relationships with real customers. The bots that engage in this unauthorized reselling of limited time offer products make a great deal of money, and so they do not give up easily. Whenever they're detected, they retool immediately. As such, they represent an advanced, persistent threat. In partnership with F5, Puma was able to put a stop to the bots, making their product launches substantially more effective at reaching real customers.
Jim, I know I've certainly been frustrated when I've tried to get a new release sneaker, and I just, you know, can't beat the bots to the order line. There's another top area where we see our retail customers have to deal with, bot attacks, and that's really around gift card fraud and loyalty program attacks. And it's interesting. The National Retail Federation found that gift card fraud cost retailers an estimated $1.4 billion. And study also found then that bots are responsible for 20% or more of all gift card fraud. So that's a substantial impact to the bottom line when we take a look at retail customers specifically. Secondarily, retail is not the only segment where we see bot attacks negatively impacting customers and the bottom line. There are widespread attacks across financial services, media and entertainment, and we see in other segments also.
Yeah, absolutely. So, given what you've just said, then, Jim, let me ask you, how do these bot attacks intersect with companies' regulatory and compliance obligations? And what are the potential consequences of that? And what a company board of directors is really going to want to know is what is their responsibility? In other words, their liability in these situations.
So compliance has many dimensions. Let me touch on compliance with privacy regulations. In June of 2022, the Global Privacy Assembly, an association of over 130 national data protection and privacy regulators, published intergovernmental guidelines on credential stuffing. The guidelines assert that credential stuffing poses a global risk to privacy and that organizations must take measures against it in order to stay in compliance with privacy regulations. That is, if you do not defend against bots causing credential stuffings, you could be held as out of compliance with the GDPR and other privacy regulations. As a consumer, I think this is a really good thing because the more of your accounts that an attacker can take over, the more they can use that information for social engineering. So I'm glad the GPA and privacy regulators are taking a stand against credential stuffing. Definitely bots are now important for compliance.
A great point, Jim. And I think, as a board, what they really need to think about is it's important that they ensure there are adequate measures in place to protect against bot intrusions, right? Especially when it comes to privacy issues, PII breaches, data loss, those type of things. Such a high risk when it comes to compliance components. But then also you have to come back around and validate that the measures that are taken are effective in preventing data loss and related business impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jim, this is for you. How does bot traffic directly impact the bottom line and overall business profitability? And is there an easy way to calculate this for a presentation to a board that's going to need to have this kind of information?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a taxonomy of automated threats that OWASP has put together. I'm sharing these on the screen now. I've put them into a few different categories. Some of them are criminal. Others are just unwanted actors trying to gain an unfair business advantage. Some of them are for reconnaissance, trying to find ways to attack your application. Some are used for fraud and some for intentional harm. Now, each of these automated threats may have its own costs for the organization associated with it. Now, I've put together a couple of formulas to go over. The biggest one is with credential stuffing, which has a particularly large cost to organization. The cost of credential stuffing can be broken down between account takeover incidents and account lockouts. So, for example, for each account takeover, there would be support costs and liability, meaning if criminals have stolen money in customers' account, your organization might be responsible for compensating that. Plus, there's a churn probability. That is, if a customer has their account take over, they may not remain one of your customers. So other than account takeovers, there's also account lockouts. If there are credential stuffers constantly testing credentials for a particular user, there's a good chance the account is going to be locked out. So with each account lockout, there's a support cost because the customer might contact your customer support to resolve it. Plus, there's a probability that they may abandon the shopping cart. Right? If the user is trying to make a purchase, their cart is full of goods, and at the last minute you tell them their account is locked out, you will lose revenue. Going on, there's also, of course, cost to the performance impact. If there's a heavy load of bots, and for some organizations, their total traffic could be made up of 98% bots. So there would be revenue loss, so average hours of slow performance multiplied by the revenue loss per hour of slow performance. And then there's the compute costs. So the percentage of bot traffic multiplied by the sum of compute costs and bandwidth costs that that supports your applications. This can't immediately perhaps be realized if that traffic goes away, but it would show up pretty quickly if you were using a cloud provider for these services.
Yeah, not 98% traffic potentially bots. That's a pretty terrifying statistic, I think.
It is, but we've seen it over and over. It's quite remarkable.
Absolutely. Josh, did you want to weigh in on this particular angle here?
I think, to the point that Jim made, I think if you're on a cloud provider, if you've got a way to take a look and analyze that you have bot traffic on your site, you can start doing some pretty quick math. If 98% of your cloud spend bill is based upon bot traffic, you can figure out pretty quickly how important it is to make sure you mitigate that impact to your business.
Yeah, few things are more important, I would think, as an immediate action item. All right, so let's talk about key economic indicators. What are the ones that show the extent of the damage caused by bots? So this is a kind of a multi-part thing. Key economic indicators that show the extent of the damage caused by bots. What methods can be used to show we're making a difference with mitigation and compensating controls? And finally, do you have any use cases you can share that kind of support these scenarios?
Sure. So a good way to determine the extent of bot traffic on your site is to engage in a proof of concept of an effective bot mitigation technology and run it in monitor mode. By monitor mode, I mean you're only flagging bot traffic but not mitigating it. The value of doing that is that the bot creators will not retool their bots to try to bypass you. And so you're going to get cleaner data. The type of statistics you might want to look at would be overall traffic to your site and perhaps traffic to particular paths in your site. Once you get those baseline stats of what the organic traffic looks like going forward, you'll be able to compare your actual traffic to your prior organic traffic and then make judgments about any anomalies in the rates. Another important statistic to discover is your organic login success rate. That is, what percentage of login attempts succeed? It's never going to be 100% because there are always going to be users who forget or mistype their password. The rates tend to differ by industry. So you tend to remember your banking password because you have to put it in very often. But you tend to forget other passwords that you don't have to enter all that often. So the value of knowing that rate is that credential stuffing tends to have a success rate between 0.2 and 2%, which is going to be far lower than any organic login success rate. So if you see your actual login success rate declining substantially. That can be a sign that you have a lot of credential stuffing going on. So these are good baseline statistics to collect.
Got you. Okay. So next question is has to do with how you get kind of your message across to the bosses. And this is for both you, Jim, and Josh. How do you effectively communicate to the board the economic costs and potential risks of bot attacks? Now, this is coming from the admin's IT operations point of view. How do you do that as being in operations and let them know what's really going on here?
Yeah, great question, Keith. I think the first thing is you have to get in the mind of the board. You have to think about what do they care about most, and for them, top of mind items are going to be revenue, costs, and compliance. If you focus your messaging around those three pillars, you're heading in the right direction. And I think the second component is calculating the cost and the revenue impacts for all your bot use cases. So if you can get to Jim's point, right, if you get an understanding of what the impacts are today, what the type of traffic looks like, then it becomes very simple to prioritize those and focus on the largest numbers.
Yeah, so I'd also add that in presenting to executives and to the board, focus on the most impactful numbers, not necessarily on how you calculated those numbers. There might be a lot of data and assumptions, sort of going into the weeds of how you got to those numbers. But don't lead with the weeds. First, show the most impactful number, but have your assumptions and your data available and ready to display, to go over if the executives ask tough questions. Other than that, I also recommend not fixating on precision. It's better to provide a range of values for cost and revenue impact rather than relying on sort of generic medium and high risk terminology. If you can say that bots take away between $3 and $4 million of revenue a year, that's going to be sufficient for calculating a very high ROI for bot mitigation.
Gotcha. Okay. Another question for both of you. Josh, we'll start with you. There's a tension between mitigating, reducing the bot infestation, and the ability for your customers, your users, to get actual stuff done. So how do companies balance the need for this bot mitigation with the potential for creating fiction for legitimate users?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. That is a real problem that businesses have to approach. And I think that the key thing is that, we already heard that 98% of your traffic could potentially be bots. Studies have also shown that credential stuffing attacks account for as much as 50% of all login attempts on the internet. So the reality is that this is a problem that we have to take head on. And as a company, you can implement protective measures, right, by requiring strong passwords, forcing password rotation, implementing multi-factor authentication. However, as you go through these processes, these introduce friction for your users. So I think Jim's got some insight for us too on, can you comment on how bot defense strategies can improve security and the customer experience simultaneously?
Yeah, well, so the good news is that there is no, in this regard, there is no need for a trade-off between bot mitigation and customer experience. F5 has a bot management solution called Bot Defense that is highly effective at mitigating bots, has near zero false positives, and does not rely whatsoever on CAPTCHA or MFA. You might choose to introduce MFA for other reasons, but you would not be forced to because of bots. And you can and certainly should consider removing CAPTCHA puzzles that can frustrate customers. So bot defense here is a win-win, both better security and better customer experience.
Well, that's going to be really good news, I think, for a lot of the attendees today. And that kind of moves us into our next question, since we've started talking about this solution. So with Google Cloud and F5 both providing security capabilities, how does that collaboration work? Who should a potential customer start with, and what are the first steps they should take to enable protection? So I'd like both of you to kind of walk us through your thoughts on this.
So let me point out that we do indeed have a lot of collaboration. F5 collaborates quite substantially with Google. Bot Defense is built using GCP services such as BigQuery and Dataflow. GCP made it possible for F5 to scale Bot Defense in ways that would have otherwise been quite difficult.
Yeah, good points, Jim. And it is true. We do partner in a lot of areas. And as a matter of fact, the way that we help our customers is by implementing secure and scalable solutions to address their cloud application delivery. Google does have a bot mitigation product called reCAPTCHA. And if you've not yet made an effort to mitigate bots in your environment, reCAPTCHA could be a good first step for you. But we also see many of our customers leveraging F5 distributed cloud bot defense to reduce friction and expand on the level of efficacy.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Indeed, we at F5 and many of our customers believe that F5 bot defense has the highest efficacy in the industry. It's a great choice if you discover that the attackers going after your site are constantly retooling to bypass your detections. It is important, regardless of which bot management service you choose, to periodically determine whether it's remaining effective. The criminals who run bots can make a lot of money on credential stuffing, on scraping, on unauthorized reselling. They're just not going to give up easy. To make sure you're using the right service for your organization, just continue to review the data.
So then, Josh, related to that, how do companies know if the solution that they have implemented is being effective? So in other words, what are the operational metrics that you should be monitoring to determine, how effective your mitigation efforts are?
Yeah, great question. I think Jim brought up some really good components earlier in the way that you need to get a baseline. And so that's the first step, right? Figure out where are you today by doing passive inspection. I think the next thing is once you have those baselines, you need to measure the impact across the key areas, right? So when we talked about what is the message the board's looking for, what is the key impact to revenue, what's the key impact to application performance and uptime, and then secondarily, you have to really take a look at the kind of back-end support of this. So from a customer support activity, when you have things like fraudulent card activity, what is the impact to you from a customer perspective? And then what are the costs that you have to deal with an account due to account compromise, chargebacks, those type of things. And then how much time does your IT team spend manually investigating and mitigating against bot attacks? Those are all key areas to really take into account when you're looking at this. What metrics do you track, and then how do you measure the performance?
For sure. Okay, Jim, for you now, we're obviously in the cloud era, and that is where both of your companies are doing so much. What that brings with it, cloud native development, so things like microservices and all of that. The other era we're in is APIs then, right? That's how everything is interconnected and talking to each other. So given the ever increasing importance of API security, what is the role of API security? Let's ask it that way. What's the role of API security in bot mitigation, and how can it be enforced in a DevSecOps pipeline under the realization that there's only going to be more APIs out there every day, basically, and this situation is only going to get more fraud?
Great, thanks. Great question, Keith. Yes, many of our enterprise customers are coming to us and talking to us about API security. Bots are most relevant to APIs that are accessed from interactive applications, that is generally web and mobile apps. For APIs accessed by applications, you're always going to want to know whether the agent interacting with the application is a real human being or a bot. And so bot mitigation is very relevant to API security. All of the bot cases, from credential stuffing through scraping, may involve APIs, depending on how the application is architected. Regarding DevOps, yes, bot mitigation can and should be incorporated into the DevOps pipeline, just as other forms of runtime security, such as WAF and DDoS protection. F5 makes that very easy with its distributed cloud platform. which provides a comprehensive security stack on the edge that can be fully automated through API calls. We have a lot of great content on that topic at F5's community site, devcentral.f5.com. I recommend it.
Great. Okay, Josh, what is your perspective on the API security question?
Well, I think Jim brought up a lot of really good points, and I think as we get more and more into application scale and deployment on public cloud environments, it's really important to make this a priority as far as how do you protect those APIs. I think we've got a wealth of information for our customers out there on our joint partnership pages. Of course, I want to continue to thank Jim and F5 for their partnership to really help us protect our customers in these areas and securing their applications as they deploy them on Google Cloud.
All right. Well, Jim and Josh, this has been a fascinating discussion about a topic area that probably doesn't get as much publicity as it should. And hopefully we're doing our small part here to emphasize something that every company needs to be more aware of, I would argue, and more concerned about, and something that is going to just grow in importance as we go along. It's been a real delight to talk to both of you, and we've got some really good questions coming in, and I think it's going to be a time to jump on those here in just a minute. All right, and we are about ready to go. I've got Jim and Josh right here with me. What you can see on the slide there is a link to get some more resources. And I encourage you to check those as well and to click on those, and they will bring up windows that you can get more information from. So make sure you take advantage of all of that. So some great questions coming in. Everyone seems to be so interested in this topic. I'm glad to see this sort of excitement around it. And, that there's a bunch of great questions. So Jim and Josh, you are with me. Let's start with a question from Michael. He wants to know, why don't companies block IPs from known bots before purchases can be done? Now, this could be for either you, Jim, or Josh, or both of you, if you want to take it on.
Sure, I can address that one. That's a good question. In fact, it is quite common for organizations to defend against bots by blocking IP addresses. And that works at a certain stage of the evolution of bots. But there are services available that the bot creators can use that allow them to send their requests through proxy networks. And these proxy networks, in a sense, convert the requests to going from the attacker's IP address to coming from millions of residential IP addresses, in fact, tens of millions of residential IP addresses, so many that it's infeasible to try to put them all on a deny list. And because of the way ISPs use natting, if you were to try to block all of these residential IPs, you would be blocking many of your real customers. So for advanced bots, that's not an effective technique any longer.
Josh, do you have any additional thoughts to add to that?
I think it's one of the key points Jim's making is we're seeing a lot of advancements in how the industry is evolving when it comes to bot attacks. There's actually one of the questions from Paul in here. I hope you don't mind if I pivot real quick, but
Sure.
to think about how Jim's making the statement that blocking IPs isn't just sufficient enough. As we take a look at how AI is evolving and LLM is stepping into the fray, we're seeing things where AI can quickly generate fake content, such as news articles, social media posts, product reviews, right? And then that can be used to manipulate buyers' decisions, spread misinformation, right? Promote fraudulent products and services. So bots are really evolving in their complexity, and we have to evolve in the tools that we use to prevent those type of attacks. The other thing is that we're seeing bots, especially around LLM models, really start to propagate when it comes to phishing email attempts. And so when we're thinking about credential stuffing, web scraping, there's a lot more intelligence that these bots now have, where they can include through summation a more sophisticated attack that looks much more legitimate when it hits the user. And so we have to think about, how do we train our users to understand what a legitimate versus non-legitimate type phishing attack looks like, and then think about what the implications are if those users are to click on the links and enter credentials into a third-party website. So of course, this is another area where it's really important. Not only is education important, but the tools that you use and the sophistication that you have to prevent from getting to phishing websites and have known defense against that environment is really important as well. So I think sophisticated tools are important and required when we take a look at sophisticated threats.
Yeah, phishing attacks are once again getting more popular, and they're getting better than ever and much more able to fool people with the use of LI. I just wanted to make one quick clarification here on what you said, Josh. When you say LLM, you mean large language model, correct?
Yes, Keith, I appreciate you making that distinction. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. We are acronym rich in our environment, and yeah, sometimes
For
I forget
sure.
to simplify the language.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, next question. This one is from Chris, and this is definitely or directly related to the boardroom aspect of this event that we're doing today. Chris wants to know, what is the best way to convince organizational leadership that utilizing bots could create efficiencies if the risks are managed?
Yeah, go ahead, Jim,
That,
if you want to make first go
Either
ahead.
that's a good
Chris, why don't you
question.
jump in? Yeah, we're good. We're good. Nope.
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. I'd have to think through
Yeah, sure.
what efficiencies does the questioner have in mind? It's certainly for some organizations that are, say, working with aggregators, and aggregators may bring some benefit to the organization, but the organization might choose to rate limit or kind of throttle the access of the aggregator, or push the aggregator to use established APIs as opposed to scraping. And in that way, bot management might play a role in making sure that aggregation is benefiting the business.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, related to that, then, we've been talking about how AI can harm it. How is AI able to help fight the bots? So, kind of the flip coin of that other question.
Jim, did you
So
want to make a first run at it? Yeah, go ahead.
sure. So we at F5 use AI quite extensively in mitigating bots. So our solution involves collecting on the client a large number of signals about both the environment and the behavior. And we use those signals to build models to make real-time decisions about whether a request is coming from a bot. So the entire system is based, sort of driven by AI and machine learning.
It's a great point, Jim, and I know for sure, we partner quite a bit on how F5 is able to enhance the technologies that it provides to its customers, specifically by leveraging the platform enhancements that we can deliver. Of course, Google, has been a leader in AI for quite some time. And when we take a look at predictive algorithms and the way that we've made tool sets available for companies like F5 to enhance and enrich the solutions they bring to market, we're also, of course, providing a wide range of technologies when it comes to large language models and how we can take a look at not only the anomalous behavior that may be occurring, right? So the initial detections that Jim was talking about earlier in our session here, but then how do we start to look at these more sophisticated threat vectors and do analysis then on what those behaviors look like, and then maybe even looking at malicious code types, and then being able to analyze those and provide better intelligence to make sure that we understand not only kind of source of where these bots are coming from, what their behaviors look like, but then also what is the content that's being generated and how can we identify that that's not human generated content versus bot generated content. So I think there's a lot of research and development being implemented, as we speak, And I'm sure everyone, on the webinar is quite familiar with how much LLM is the large language models are being talked about in the industry. We're certainly right at the forefront of helping to make sure that we're staying ahead of the bad actors when it comes to how can we leverage this technology.
For sure. You mentioned human versus bot generated, and we have a question that kind of follows up on that. Michael wants to know, why can't companies detect when a bot buys items, keeps the money that was spent, and then cancel the order for the real people? So maybe this is happening. What's your sense of that inability to detect when a bot is actually doing work like that?
So it is certainly possible. This question is about unauthorized reselling.
Right.
It is certainly possible to use bot detection products like F5 Bot Defense to determine whether a purchase request is coming from a human or a bot. Then the decision about how to handle that request would be up to the organization, their business model, their legal contracts, and would sort of inform how they would go about reacting if they determine whether it's a bot.
Right. So I want to ask a question now that came in, and it does relate to the idea of friction being introduced that we discussed earlier. The question is, why don't companies require a reCAPTCHA or an SMS text verification before a purchase can be made? Now, doing that certainly has the potential, doesn't it, Josh, for adding more friction, adding more steps, which then may discourage customers. So I guess the question, where is that balance? Or should companies add all these extra steps because the bot problem is so severe? What's your sense?
I think it depends on your exposure. Right? As you take a look at how much, to Jim's point earlier, if you can get an understanding of what type of bot traffic you have today and what the impact of that is to your business, then you can start to look at what are the right protections and mechanisms that you put in place for your environment. It could be that reCAPTCHA is a very effective tool depending upon what level of threat you assess in your environment. But in other cases, to Jim's point, we see kind of the complexity and threat vector getting much broader. And so how do you put tools that have much more efficacy in place to make sure that you're adjusting to the different sophistication methods that are coming? And to your point around, friction for the customer, right? Ideally, we want to make this so that the user simply transacts on the website and everything else is just transparent or invisible to the user, right? We want to eliminate as many hurdles for them to jump through so that we become, as a retailer or e-commerce vendor, as simple to do business with as possible. And I think, on the other hand, we see things in our environment where biometrics are coming into play, right? We're getting better understanding of the user, the device they're accessing from, and kind of their origin. So are they already a trusted user? And that technology then gets adapted into how we identify. If we know a user is trusted and verified, we can allow them kind of a fast pass, right, through to transaction, versus having to do a lot of detection around an unknown user to determine if it's a bot or human. So I think, as technologies for defense, identity, and trust and verification get more sophisticated, we can try and eliminate some of those hurdles for friction.
Absolutely. All right, here's a question that I think both of you would like to take a whack at. How can a company incorporate bot management and risk mitigation into its overall corporate governance structure? So we're talking really high-level stuff here.
I think starting with the OWASP automated threat taxonomy is a good beginning because it's structured. It gives you a list, and an organization can go through the list and decide which of those automated threats impact the business and incorporate those threats into the overall threat modeling, which is an important part of security governance.
Josh, what's your opinion on this one?
I think kind of going back to what does the board care about, and then what do you think I need about governance as far as implementation. When you get a risk score of your environment, you understand what your loss vectors look like. You can determine how much you have to invest in the tools, the talent, and the methods in which you protect your organization. And so, once you've got that exposure assessment completed, create a bot management policy, outline the goals to mitigate the environment and the measures that you'll take, and then assign responsibility in your organization for who owns bot management. What are the technical controls you need to implement? How do you educate your employees to mitigate on the social engineering aspect of this? And then monitor your systems, right, for bot activity, and then have a plan to respond to bot attacks. So I think it's a fantastic question. I think it's really important to prioritize it.
Those kind of specifics are good too, because it's something like this, you can easily get into a lot of finger pointing, which is just going to be counterproductive, for the organization for obvious reasons. Jim, we have a specific one for you here. Paul wants to know, does F5 offer a worksheet, or I might expand that to any kind of online tool that can help a company measure the ROI of mitigating risks from bots?
Yes, we do. And you have the link to it on the screen. Now I see we have a free calculator on f5.com where you can put in some information and get output in terms of a business model for defending against bots. We also have a free consultation. So you could spend time with an F5 expert and walk through a more sophisticated model and produce a business case for why to mitigate bots. How much is it worth to your organization?
Absolutely. All right. We have time for just a couple more questions here, I think. And so here's a really interesting one. How can we calculate the value of bot mitigation in relation to creating better customer loyalty? That's important. How do you figure it out? What key performance indicators are you looking at for something like that, Josh?
Sure, Keith. Let me take a stab at it. I think when it boils down to what you're trying to solve for, you really want an improved customer experience. Right? That's what we're looking at here. We want to make sure the customer has an ease of doing business with you, and then you want to find a way to make sure that you improve your brand loyalty from those customers and increase your sales. So we're really taking a look at what's the impact as we mitigate bot threats in your environment. And so, you think then about decreasing costs that enable you to provide better value to your customers. Look at reduction in support cases. So escalations you may have from customers where you've had credential stuffing situations. Increase in repeat traffic is another good metric to be able to follow, right? How loyal are your customers to you? And then what are the net promoter scores that you see coming from your customers as you're getting to better customer loyalty?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could also break it down into the specific automated threats. So, for example, unauthorized reselling, like scalping. Again, think of the incidents of all of the Taylor Swift concert tickets being purchased. For your organization, if you are an e-commerce organization and you're doing product launches or you're having limited time offers that you expect to earn a certain amount of value for your organization, to build relationships with your customers, to create new customers or enhance customer lifetime value. You could look at that model of what you're expecting the campaigns to achieve, and then you can calculate, wait, what if we did not sell these services or these goods to real customers? What if most of them were purchased by bots? How would that impact the outcome that we're seeking? So that would be one way to look at how bots could impact customer experience and customer relationships.
Sure, sure. So I think for our final question, here's one that that I really like, and it's kind of the mirror image of what you were just saying, Jim. That was from the customer side. Let's look at bots quickly from the other side, from the companies that are having to deal with all of these bots. You might actually call it bot fatigue. So the question is this: my team is burned out dealing with this bot explosion. How do we reduce our employee burnout related to bot attack management? That's a really important consideration here.
Sure, that's a really good point, and we see this happening to some organizations. Once the bots become advanced, that is, they're making use of capture solving services, they're making use of residential IP proxy networks to mask their attacks behind millions of residential IP addresses. Once they retool such that their requests look nearly indistinguishable from those of real customers, then it becomes very difficult to try to stop those attacks using whack-a-mole techniques like header fingerprints or IP address deny lists. It would just use up so much of the security team's time, right? So that's when you need to deploy an effective bot mitigation solution that's going to be making use of rich signal data and AI to effectively react, see the retooling and react quickly so that the burden is not on your security team.
Right. So, Josh, let me ask you this in the same question, but you can answer it however you want, either on a detailed level or a more overview level. Is this a problem with Google Cloud? I mean, this is obviously an issue that you deal with at your company, which is, one of the biggest on the planet. Is employee burnout dealing with bots? Is this a real thing at Google, and how are you dealing with it, if this is something you can answer?
Yeah, let me address it kind of on a high level. I mentioned we had some really good questions on AI, and I think there's an interesting component around how Google has been born in the cloud, right? We are cloud native by our very nature. We are very much exposed when it comes to internet traffic and threat vectors. And so, kind of from the very core of how we've built our technologies, and I think we have 9 applications at this point that have over 1 billion users. If you think about search and Gmail and YouTube and all the properties that Google itself has, this has given us the opportunity to really learn a lot about how the bad actors try and penetrate different applications, and they try and use bot attacks and denial of service and those type of things. And we've natively built technologies into the fabric of how Google applications are protected so that user experience is as high as it can be, that we don't have a lot of bot activity that really draws down performance of our applications or our environment. And then also, from a user protection standpoint, and when it comes to data, right, we've really put a lot of technologies in place to protect those properties. So we take those learnings and we share them with companies like F5 so that they then can incorporate those into their tooling and enhance the way that they provide protection for their customers. And when you think about the way that Google Cloud is where enterprises deploy their applications, right, there's a combination of the Google platform being secured by Google by default. But then you also have the customer application, right? The company or corporate applications that get stood up and they need to be defended in their own way. And so that's where this partnership really comes together. You take the goodness of what Google's got from a platform perspective, all the learnings we have across all our applications and how we help to defend, and then you combine that with the intelligence and capability that F5 brings together with bot defense technologies. And when you combine those, it gives the customer the best of both worlds. And I think that's really what we're excited to bring to the market, is how can you combine the goodness of Google and the goodness of F5 and apply that in your own world so that you've got the best opportunity to deliver high quality applications that scale and are safe.
Like peanut butter and jelly, right? Better together. All right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Jim and Josh, this has been so much fun, and I learned just a ton from this. This is an issue that simply is only going to get worse. It's only going to increase in importance for organizations. And I thank you so much for your time today, for the presentations, and for what we learned. I just had a great time and really appreciate your perspectives here.
Thank you, Keith. It's been a lot of fun, and thank you, Jim. Certainly appreciate the audience's time spending with us today and the opportunity to learn more about this important topic.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Thanks, Josh, and thanks to all the audience who asked such great questions.
Thank you again, gentlemen. It really was it really was so important and so good to be able to take all of these questions. I just love the fact that that everybody is wondering what's going to happen next and what do we do about this new plague that is rapidly sort of encroaching on all of our lives, all of us who are involved on the internet, essentially at this point, which is all of us, So I want to thank you for putting together a great presentation. We really appreciate your time today. And with that, folks, we are very close to being wrapped here. It is now time for one last piece of business, and that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. You don't think we forgot about that, did you? As I mentioned at the beginning, you do have to be present or have been present for the entire event to be eligible for the prize. And we do have a winner today of our $250 Amazon gift card, and that is Daryl Tarpkin from New Jersey. Way to go, Daryl. Congratulations. We will be in touch soon to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank F5 and Google Cloud for being here, for taking so many questions, and for illuminating us to this particular issue. And thanks, as always, to all of you for attending and for your great questions. We do this for you, and we are so delighted that you decided to spend part of your day with us. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. That concludes the event for today. Have a great rest of your day.